look, I've been looking forward to this conversation with Rod for some time because it seems every time we're together, we get lost in conversation. So maybe they'll give us 45 minutes for this, Rod. Let's see what unfolds. But, you know, I'd love to start with, you know, what you're up to now. Because I know that you are on the board of Tourism Tasmania. It's got to be an incredibly interesting experience. So talk a little bit about that and tell us a little bit more about Tasmania. Who here has been to Tasmania? Well, we got a couple.
Well, I can help them, you know, decide to change their upcoming travel plans because it's a really interesting place. Well, there it is on the map. It's that little island down to the south of the big island, Australia. It's 500,000 people and 1.3 million visitors each year. It's a carbon neutral place. All the power is hydro and wind, so we don't have to do anything to get there. And it's really interesting to go from this side of the industry, the side of the industry that we all are in, where we're trying to sell something. We're focused on KPIs around, you know, more visitors, more tourists, and more dollars, more profit, into an environment where it's a little more nuanced. You want the visitors, but you want a certain number, and you want them to come at certain times during the year. You don't want them all there at once. And you want them to be a good match with what you have to offer. So we're definitely talking about different things at Tourism Tasmania board meetings than I would talk about in any of my history.
And Tasmania is more of an outdoor place with beautiful open beaches and bays and...
It is. It's a stunningly beautiful place. I'm from Tasmania originally, which is, you know, they wanted somebody who understood online distribution and the tourism industry. They couldn't find anybody good, so they asked me. And I guess I'm helping them understand how, you know, a small island off a big island can reach out to the world and attract the right type of visitor.
So from that perspective, I mean, we heard yesterday some really interesting data from Phocuswright about sustainability and over-tourism and how travelers, who they think is responsible for managing that. Do you think tourism boards like Tourism Tasmania, in other places that are suffering from over-tourism, that it's their responsibility to address those issues?
Well, I see there's an image up. This is a place called Wineglass Bay.
Doesn't look over-tourist.
No, but believe me, Coles Bay, which is the town of 300 locals who live nearby, on a Saturday afternoon when there is a lot of tourists at Wineglass Bay, they find it difficult to drive into their local village and get, you know, gasoline for their car or go to the local market because the streets are clogged.
Yeah.
It wasn't what they signed up for when they bought the house there 40 or 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So those are challenges that tourism boards, DMOs, whatever, can't solve on their own. They need to solve in collaboration with industry. And I think the message that I think we as DMOs need to get out to the industry is if we don't collaborate on this together, we'll lose the social license and we'll start to have the sort of thing or the sort of response from locals, which is, you know, the lockbox on an apartment being glued shut so that, you know, when the visitor arrives, you know, calamity ensues.
Yeah.
That's not where, as an industry, we want to go. We need to be collaborative. Beyond saying that, I don't have a lot of ideas, other than we just need to talk a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, it's certainly going to be a big problem, especially when I think China outbound starts to really kick in. It's going to be hard to see where this goes. So I want to now go to your origin story with Viator. And for those of you who don't know, Rod is one of the great entrepreneurs of travel, founder of Viator, built that business, sold it to TripAdvisor. But like so many great stories of startups, it's not as simple as just sitting around and putting together a PowerPoint deck and a financial model and taking it to investors. It sort of started in a different way. You were slinging websites back in 1997. How did it all come together?
Yeah, we were building websites and for travel companies, and we got a contract with Sabre, to build. They had this great idea that they wanted to sell tours and activities to their 40,000 travel agencies around the world. So we got this contract, I think it was about 300 grand, and we built it. It took about a year. We got on a plane to deliver it. I still can't believe the day that we arrived and went out to their headquarters. There it is, that's the building. And there were security guards in the lobby. And there were people leaving with tears in their eyes and a cardboard box. They had fired over 1,000 people on this day, and all of the people that we'd been working with who had commissioned this project were gone. They were all gone. It took us 48 hours to find a person senior enough in the organization to say, look, you know, those dudes who you just fired, and he said, yeah, we know. You keep it. We don't want it. We're not going to be in that business. It was a terrific idea, but they moved on.
Did they sign over the IP? Was there?
They did all of the right things. It was terrific from our point of view, and we were able to build a wonderful business around what was, for the 1,000 people who got fired and the half dozen people that we'd been working with, was obviously a very dramatic and, you know, at a personal level, a really sad time. But for us, it worked out tremendously well.
So great opportunities come in funny little packages sometimes.
Right. I would never claim that building tours and activities OTA was our idea. It wasn't at all.
Amazing. And so that was 2003 or 4-ish?
No, that was 1997.
97?
Yeah.
When that happened. So then you built the beginning of Viator. You raised some money. You got to a point where you needed to raise more money. You're now in sort of the dark days of 2005, 2006. And this is, again, I think is a phenomenal lesson for entrepreneurs in raising money. And you essentially were on the verge of completely just getting wiped out, right? You were getting a lot of maybes. No one was calling you back. 20 pitches, the typical up and down Sand Hill Row and everywhere that you could find dough. And it was going nowhere. Then something really interesting happened.
Yeah, we had visited, I guess, about 20 venture capital firms and got the same sort of answer. This was great, we'll call you, which is code for we won't call you.
Yeah.
Chris is a VC, that's
pretty much. Well, they usually say we'll call you if we have any more questions, so it's not a totally disingenuous
Right, that's
state.
what you do?
That's what we do.
Okay, just checking in on that.
And we don't feel bad if we don't call because we didn't have any more questions.
So we heard about a guy at the Carlyle Group who was new and wanted to do an investment in travel. And the Carlyle Group do, you know, munitions and oil and gas and $500 million investments. We thought this is crazy, but we went and saw him, and the meeting went the same as pretty much every meeting went. And we were preparing to leave, and I picked up his card, and his name was Alan Tigerson. He's a lovely guy. He's now the CEO of DocuSign. But right then, he was a guy who hadn't made any investments. And I looked at his card, and I said, that's a Danish name, right? And he said, yeah. And I knew that all Danes are monarchists. And
this ties together. Hang in there.
Even more than the Brits are monarchists. They love the Queen. And it had happened that the Crown Prince, Frederick, had married a commoner from Tasmania. And I said, you're Danish, I'm Tasmanian, we should talk. and he looked at me, and are all Danes monarchists? Yes, they are. He said, yeah, we should. And we talked for 20, 30 minutes.
Standing there as you're basically exiting the conference room.
Just standing there. And I actually loved the story of how these two, they met in a pub during the Sydney Olympics. She had no idea who he was. He bought the drinks. She got a sort of an inkling. He had a black American Express card. He paid for everybody's drinks in the pub that night. Anyway, we got on famously. And he did call back and said, why don't you come and meet my partners? And if it wasn't for Princess Mary, I don't think that would have happened.
I think it's such an important lesson for entrepreneurs that are raising money is that, so much of my peers, you think of venture capitalists and investors as being just purely mathematical, and it's all about, does the pitch deck match a growing market thesis that I have, and economics are there and so forth. But the reality is there's this huge art and not science that is about relationships. It's about trust. Will I bet on this person? And by taking that, that probably maybe saved Viator.
Oh, it absolutely.
Maybe.
It absolutely saved us. We were running out of money really fast. We'd visited everybody that we knew. This guy was a Hail Mary pass, and he turned out to be Danish, and that was a good thing.
And you made him money too. In the end of the day,
he made a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
sold to TripAdvisor in
2014.
2014. Very good.
Yeah. I wish we hadn't sold to TripAdvisor.
Yeah.
I don't think TripAdvisor's model for buying businesses is positive for the acquired business. I think it's a model that says, you've done a good job and we're buying you, but we're the adults in the room here.
And so why did you sell it? Did the board say it's time? Did you just get an offer out of nowhere?
Yeah, it was 17 years.
Yeah, it was time.
And for Carlyle, it was 9 years, which is it's well beyond the point where they would want to exit. So it was a good time to sell.
Yeah.
And they had a checkbook, so I'm appreciative of that fact. I just think their model is one where they think they're the smartest guys in the room. They move your team on, and they change the model around. Why buy a company if you don't like what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Booking.com and others, I think, have a much more realistic model where they say, we love you, we're buying you, we're going to give you more money, keep doing what you're doing.
So how do you think about the environment now, right? You built this really interesting consumer travel business back in the day. You and I have seen over the years, time and time again, people trying to crack into the consumer travel space in some way or another. Sometimes it's inspiration and planning. Sometimes it's more transactional. And it's tough. Do you think that is just sort of a truth about the markets that will never change? Or do you think we're on the cusp of something new now?
Well, highly unlikely to change. Having said that, I want to establish my credentials as a forecaster of what's likely to...
A forecaster of doom?
When, I knew Steve Kaufer from TripAdvisor back in 2000 when he made the pivot to being a hotel reviews site. We were at a Phocuswright conference, I think in LA or Phoenix, somewhere on the West Coast, and he's showing me this new model. And I remember perfectly my response when he said, we're going to do hotel reviews. I said, man, you are smoking dope. That is never going to work. And I was just so wrong about that. It turned out to be a terrific idea. So my view is that, you think about how many new consumer-facing, important, at-scale travel sites there are over the last few years, and there's sort of hardly any.
Yeah.
And I think the emergence of the new technologies recently is just going to make it harder.
Well, that's interesting, and I don't necessarily agree with that, right? And so let me throw out a thesis, and you respond to it. So it seems like over the last 15 plus years, the power of search has been the bone crusher of all things consumer travel, right? Because the early players in that cycle were able to acquire, because suppliers were sort of stumbling in a sleep post 9/11, the big OTAs were able to build up a big enough share that they got that flywheel of cash spinning. And they could just take 40% of their net revenue and just plow it back into search and outcompete everybody on acquisition. And so it was sort of stuck. And it was largely stuck because Google followed the money and over time changed their experience for people doing search to continue to monetize the behemoths, right? But if we're moving into a world of conversational search, right? And it becomes then maybe a little bit more about connecting the traveler with the information that they're actually looking for, rather than connecting the traveler with a whole bunch of promotional opportunities from the guy paying the most money. Will that democratize search in some way? Will it democratize and create opportunity for very focused, specialized startups to play in consumer travel?
Well, it could, but I don't think it will. I think the world we live in, the universe we live in, is one where you have these big planets, and apparently, I don't understand physics, but mass, they suck things in. And I think, Google, Booking, Expedia, et al., they are the big planets out there. They're going to be much better at this AI thing than anybody else. It's already clear, that implementing AI-based customer service or trip planning or whatever at scale there's a level of complexity to it. Now, who's got the most money? Who's got the most people? Who's got the most experience? Who's got the established position in the market already to be in a position to take advantage of all this and be the leaders? Well, it's the guys that are the leaders now.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to democratize things at all. I think we're going to see further consolidation and further people getting attracted into those sort of...
But at the same time, you've always said, and I have completely agreed with you, that leisure travelers in particular enjoy the hunt, right? And so if that's true, and my sister is a classic example of this. If you told her that you could plan her leisure trips by visiting one place or talking to an AI agent versus all of the 30 sites she visits and the research she does, that would piss her off. She wouldn't want to do that. She gets so much pleasure out of the research.
Right.
And I think that there's been some studies that have shown that that's true for a lot of leisure travelers. So is the idea of an agent who just tells you what to do for spring break also kind of a busted idea? Are we in the early days of this Gen AI hype where we think that's what people want, but in the end of the day, it isn't?
People are still going to want, and an important part of a vacation, a holiday, is for most people, is that planning phase. It's a really weird psychology that when you look back on a vacation you took 12 months ago, if you spent a bunch of time researching it, during that research period, the sky was always blue, the sea was always green, the drinks arrived on time, and your partner was really nice to you.
Right.
You got on really well. It was like the perfect holiday. If you spend time planning and you have that planning experience, in 3 years' time, when you look back on it, the memories actually of that planning experience get mixed into your actual memories, and you have a more positive view of that vacation that you took. Now, that's academic research. I didn't make that up.
Yeah.
It's just the way it works. People are not going to give that up. I think there's always going to be sites out there and places and apps that you can go and do the research. But who's going to get the bookings and who's going to make the money? I think it's the usual suspects.
But the usual suspects ultimately, I mean, look, if Google will tell you that their principal job is to give the user the information that they're looking for, right? And in the end of the day, a traveler is looking for a bed to sleep in and a plane to fly on and a restaurant to eat at and things to do. They're not looking for another meta intermediary to tell them the bed to sleep in, the flight to fly. So, wouldn't it be logical that ultimately their technology would lead people to the supply and get them closer to the supply? And so that sort of hobbles, in some ways, the choke point of the big OTAs. Do you agree with that? Or do you think I'm smoking dope?
I know you're smoking.
No, I only do edibles.
No, I actually heard Chris is more of a gummies guy.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Well, look, don't get me started on Google's incursion into our space and how they've ripped all the customers away from the people who have funded their operations for so many years. I feel like a broken record on that. It does make sense to connect people to
supply.
To supply, yeah, it does. But I think we come back to our earlier point, which is people want to look around. It's an interesting
Right.
part of the process. They want to see different places where they could potentially buy, different places where they could potentially stay, etc.
So could you see a world where conversational AI, again in search, sort of leads people down that path, right? Because so if they can have that conversation with a Google agent, wouldn't that agent then deliver to the traveler some of the more sort of niche and close to supply ideas? And therein lies the opportunity for people who have more specialization, right, in travel. I mean, I guess I'm being somewhat rhetorical. I think that there will be increasing opportunities in consumer travel. They won't be the giants. They won't be, OTA version 2.0. But there will be new ways to play in that value chain between consumer and ultimately where they travel. Okay, that's just not subtle. I guess the big guns have arrived. But anyway, more for us to talk about.
Yes,
And
indeed.
look, I think in closing, one of the things that I want to say, and this has been a lot of fun working with Rod over the years, is that the entrepreneurial energy that we see out of, in particular, young people who are building businesses, their willingness to continue to take at-bats and innovate is something that is just so exciting. And we both continue to support that and want to be around it. And I think all of you will find as you get older that becomes just the thing you look for. So it's really a pleasure to continue to have these debates, and we want to have them with you all too. And we'll see where things go. Thank you, Rod.
Terrific. Thank
Yeah.
you.